Hello, hello, hello. It's so great to have you back on the Welcome to Humanity True Voice edition. Hi, I'm Dr. Fred, and I'm the host of the Welcome to Humanity podcast. And as we move forward in the Welcome to Humanity podcast, we've created some special editions, the True Voice edition, to begin off this year. And it is in these editions that we take a deeper dive into what it means to have a true voice, what it means to take steps and directions to make this world a better place. What are the issues? What are the problems? And what are the solutions? And some of the solutions include and really are required to find our true voice. So I've taken it upon myself to have some past guests, people that I've interviewed before, people that I've had wonderful conversations with before on this edition of the Welcome to Humanity podcast. And today is no different. Although today is a spectacular opportunity to meet a past guest that I've had. Mitzi Perdue was on my show somewhere in 2020. We had an incredible conversation about what her passion is and the difference she's making really at a global scale. Mitzi arrived on the planet in spectacular fashion and then has really had the world unfold in front of her and has done her own work to unfold the world so that she can make a difference before she leaves, and without question has already done that. And the rest of her life is also really dedicated to continuing to make a difference in areas that really matter to her. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to interview and to have a conversation for you, our listeners, with Mitzi Perdue as we discuss the new edition. What are the issues that are here with us now that are worth paying attention to? What are the issues that are here with us now that are of great concern or that have some allowance for us to make a difference before we leave this planet? So without going much further down that road, I'd like to introduce you to Mitzi Perdue. Mitzi, thank you so much for coming back to the Welcome to Humanity podcast, and thank you for being here for the True Voice edition. It's just wonderful to have you as a guest. It's really great. So, Mitzi, we had a brief conversation, and what I'm really interested in, things have changed a little bit since we last spoke, and the world is a crazy space, but I'm not even positive that it's any crazier than it's always been. I just think that we are a little bit more aware that it's crazy, perhaps, or we're being distracted into some obvious crazy areas of the world. But it seems to me when I look back at history, there was never a time where the people who were inhabiting the planet at any particular moment didn't think that it was the craziest time in history. So this is just another moment where everyone knows that this is the craziest time in history. Now, I like to think that the biggest problem in the world might not be what people think it is. There's certainly medical issues, or there's viral conditions out there, or there's political problems, or there's climate change, or there's, big problems that have been here a while, hunger and poverty, or discrimination, racism. There's so many problems that we can point our finger to. And I like to think that all those problems really are monumental. They're monstrous and they're really difficult, super challenging to the whole planet. But for me, one of the problems is that we're giving up our ability to actually talk about, to rally around these problems, to come together and actually unite in a fortified way to take on these problems. We're losing our voice. We're kind of giving up our capacity to speak openly about things. And to me, that represents perhaps an overarching bigger problem than all of them put together. So what I'd like you to do is to remind or introduce to our listeners what it is that drives your life. What are the issues that you're now connected to, that you're now passionate about, that you're now working to make a difference in on this world, and, finding some traction in making a difference that you can be passionate about.
Goodness, all the issues that you mentioned, I care deeply about, but since you can't do everything, I'm focusing on human trafficking. But, behind that is the very issue you mentioned a moment ago, our ability to talk with each other and how about not censor each other? It's as if we're not as good recently in coming together to address the problems. And it reminds me of a course that I took in college. I was a political science major. And one of the things that we learned is it's kind of like a Newtonian force of physics. But if one side marches, it's out in the street saying it's got to be this way, there's almost always an opposite and equal reaction of the people who feel the other way. And it's almost as if the more in your face you are with each other, the more people dig in their heels and don't work together. Mm-hmm. So I guess my approach is, I hope, conciliatory, listening to everybody, exactly. Recognizing that whether you're far to the left or far to the right, you're probably a person of goodwill, and let's see what we can do together. And I'm hugely fortunate. In fact, maybe it's not even fortunate. Maybe it's a plan. But I think every decent person in the world can unite around the fact that human slavery, which is human trafficking, is evil, and we've got to do all we can to stop it. So, that's such a long answer to your question, but I'm going to keep on monologuing, if you'll forgive me, because there's another part to it.
Yeah.
Okay, I figure my purpose in life is to increase happiness and decrease misery. And I can't think of anything where the skills and the resources that I have available to me could make a bigger difference. So that's where I'm focusing, human trafficking.
Mm-hmm. Human trafficking. So you equated human trafficking with human slavery, and both of them are just like chilling in their concepts to me. You know, I mean, they've been going on over and over time, like in various forms. Almost as far back as the Bible can speak to. You know, the Bible and the commandments actually speak openly to slavery and how to manage slaves and what you can and what you can't do and what day you're supposed to set them free and how they rank with the animals or how they rank with your spouse. You know, slavery has been something that's been in the fabric of humanity since, well, Lord does know, we're going all the way back to biblical times. What is it about the present day slavery that has us actually being able to do something to take a bite in it or to abolish it or to abolition is an interesting word here, right? Because here in America, we talk about Abraham Lincoln and abolition and slavery like it happened or like we've already taken a big bite out of it. What is the story? What is this, 21st century slavery really look like? And what's happening to our voices? What's happening?
All right, let's address what modern day slavery is. And it is actually, human trafficking is slavery. Slavery is controlling somebody else with no compensation. I mean, I think it's about as evil as it gets. And it's also probably bigger than most people imagine. It's $150 billion a year industry.
Okay, let's stop there. You didn't say million, you said billion, $150 billion industry. And that's year to year? Is that what we're talking about when you say that?
Yeah. And one of the problems with its being so huge is that there's an awful lot of money available to pay people off, to corrupt law enforcement, for example. I'll give you a statistic. Worldwide, the chances of, if you're a trafficker and you've enslaved somebody, in every country in the world that's illegal. I'm going to ask you a rhetorical question, but the rhetorical question is, what do you think the odds are of a trafficker doing jail time? And since this is rhetorical, I'll answer it for you. It's less than 1 in 100.
Yeah, I would have said less than 1%. So that's right. That makes sense.
Okay. And then in Bangladesh, which is a country that at the moment has my heart, the chances are like 1 in 250. And those are pretty concrete statistics. We know how many, actually, that's not a concrete description. We know in Bangladesh that 6,000 people were arrested. Of those 6,000, 4 went to jail. So why is there no deterrent for slavery today? And there's no deterrent because, first, the traffickers are extremely good at terrifying their victims. I'm going to kill you and I'm going to kill your family if you testify against me. There's that. But then there's also that they've got so much money that it's fairly easy to bribe and corrupt government officials. And now let me say a good word about Bangladesh, because I just said something negative about them.
Well, you said they had your heart, so I was going to find out what that means.
Okay, here's what it means. There's an association, it's called the Optimist Foundation, that wants to see if we can eliminate trafficking, human trafficking in one country, with the idea that if we could just bring to bear every resource that we have, whether it's academic or non-governmental organizations or governments, if we could pick every single thing that we know about how to combat human trafficking and apply it to one country and eliminate it in one country, here's what would happen. First, the country would be a lot better off. But second, would have a blueprint, a template, a map for how to do it elsewhere, would learn the best practices of what works and what doesn't work. And the Optimist Foundation, out of, as far as I can tell, out of the whole globe, they circled in on Bangladesh because Bangladesh, first of all, the problem is enormous, but more important, up and down the highest, lowest levels of government, there's support for combating human trafficking. And they have a civil society of non-governmental organizations that are very robust, and they're committed to this, and they're committed to cooperating. And I think something really amazing could come out of it.
That's interesting. So what we're looking at here is a problem that is so ubiquitous. It's so evil in its roots. It's really omnipresent on the globe, and it's in each and every country at some level, and certainly our country here in the United States and all of the Western countries and African and South American, and I imagine deeply in Australia and deeply in China and Asia. And they're picking on, it's almost like, I love this idea that at least not too many people who are going to raise their hand and say, no, this type of human slavery is a good thing. We humans should be.
Not a whole lot of people, except the traffickers think it's great because it's incredibly profitable.
It's incredibly profitable, but you got to be hellbound to get this thing done. You need to give up your soul, don't you? I mean, have you had an opportunity to meet or discuss or be with? You speak towards the idea of listening to other folks, listening to adversarials. Have you had an opportunity to sit with these people, these traffickers, and actually speak to the merits that they see of being slave owners or actual human traffickers? Do we know anything about the mentality of these people that are inherently so evil?
I think a lot is known about them. My knowledge from them is kind of secondhand because I have talked with lots of survivors of trafficking, and their view of the traffickers is that they're completely soulless, that the traffickers, I guess it's fair to speak in generalizations, but this is the impression that I walk away with having talked with a great many, is that the traffickers treat them the way you and I, no, I won't even say you and I, they treat their victims the way they would treat an animal with no more soul or agency. I mean, your background is psychiatry. Are there people who just have absolutely no conscience and who, in fact, even enjoy the suffering of others?
Well, in psychiatry, at least they would fall into the package called sociopath, into the package of people with antisocial personality disorder approach that. But it isn't so much the psychiatric condition. What's so interesting is the callous sense of soul that gets created. Like, would these traffickers, if all the money dried up, if there was no value anymore, if there was no living that could be made, I wonder if these people would find their soul then. In other words, is the soul really gone, or is the soul just the cost-benefit analysis of having a soul is won over by money instead of having a soul?
I've even discussed that with experts in the field. And I think a lot of people who examine this think that money is just so darn corrupting that if you're Mr. Bad Guy and you're thinking, what am I going to do today? Shall I rob a bank or shall I traffic a woman? If you rob a bank, the odds of getting caught are pretty good. On the other hand, if you traffic a woman, your odds of doing this scot-free are just about omnipresent. Mm-hmm. And so let me share with our listeners, our viewers, a statistic about how profitable it is. Imagine that you're a trafficker, you're a guy, you're running 4 girls in New York. Your income, tax-free, is $1 million a year.
4 girls in New York, income tax-free, $1 million.
Yeah, and that's, if you've got some sociopathy in you to begin with, boy, that's pretty good living.
That's a way good living.
Okay, and we know that it's a good living because so many people are doing it.
It seems like you could even do it as, excuse the expression, but you could almost even do it as a side hustle. You could have a day job. You could have a family. You could be someone in the Hamptons, for God's sake, and still be someone that runs a trafficking, right? It's not a full-time job. It doesn't absorb every ounce of your body. Can you do it without your family even knowing you're doing it?
There are bunches that I'm aware of families that traffic their children.
Oh, wow.
I'll tell you how I have any expertise in this. It's that I write a weekly column, or it's a blog for Psychology Today,
I write for them too now. Did you know that? I do. I have 5 articles with them. Anyways, let's get back. Go ahead. You were writing for Psychology Today.
Yeah, and in the course of preparing the weekly blogs, mine are about 600 words long. How long are yours?
Yeah, between 700 and 1,000 words usually. Yeah.
Okay, I aim for 600 because I'm kind of hoping that if they're short, more people would read them.
I think you're probably right, actually.
Well, actually, I once took a 3-day course on blogging, and it said that the longer the blog, the fewer the readers. So
I think it's true. And we're so interested. Tell me what you got with families that are turning over their kids. So you spoke to this, and you were going to tell us how you got started with the whole gig like this.
Okay, well, in the case of a country like Bangladesh, say there just isn't enough food, and you've got 8 children, and you got a daughter that you can sell, you sell her. And by the way, you've heard about child brides, or maybe you haven't, but it's a phenomenon in third world countries where some, I suppose, are done for the well-being of the little girl involved, but in way too many cases, it's really you sell your daughter. And the reason you sell her isn't because you want to sell her. It's because you're not feeding the other kids.
It's almost cannibalistic. It's almost like, sacrificing a child for the sake of the other 7 or something like this.
I think that's a perfect description. I hadn't heard it before, but it fits. The evil of poverty is just incomprehensible because I'm pretty sure this wouldn't be happening. Well, it wouldn't be happening, at least not in the scale that it is, if it weren't for poverty. And how UBS and the Optimist Foundation are going to solve that, boy, I sure want to watch, but they're taking it on.
Right. We start looking again at the power of money and, the interface between poverty. Let's say it's hard to know where the wheel starts, but here comes poverty. Here comes the need of a loving, caring set of parents who get that if they don't do something drastic, their whole family's going to perish. And they have an opportunity that rolls by them to make $250,000.
If we're in Bangladesh, they're going to make maybe, I don't know, but I bet it's like $30 or $40 to sell a child there. And I truly don't know what the price is, but it's not millions.
Okay, so they sell their child to a trafficker. Is that how that works? Or they sell?
There's several ways that it works. Unfortunately, there are almost countless ways that it works. But one of the ways that works is a trafficker comes by and says, maybe for your 15-year-old daughter, I've got a great job for her in Dubai. She's going to make loads and loads of money and she can send it back to you. She gets to Dubai. She isn't working for this rich businessman that she hoped for. No, she's being trafficked and and I don't want to pick on Dubai. That was just the first name that popped into my head.
Okay,
it could be anywhere. In fact, it's probably unfair to pick on Dubai, but in another country, she's going to have a great job. She gets there and she finds that she's forced to have sex with strangers 10 times a night. Okay, that's one way, a false promise of a job. And one of there's so many aspects of the evil of this. But another way that a girl might get trapped into being trafficked, somebody comes by the family and says, your daughter is just so beautiful. I'm a talent scout for the such and such modeling agency. Sign her over to us and she'll be able to send money back to you. And maybe she even gets to New York, but there's no modeling job and they never get to see any more money. Nope. The trafficker's just raking in the money for a pretty child. But back to the parents who are in this horrible situation of my other kids die if I don't sell my daughter. Child brides is, in theory, it's less evil than the outright traffickers. But that daughter who's now, quote, married to this elderly person, he's beating her, he's starving her, he might even be torturing her. It's in far too many cases, a child bride's life is a really unhappy life. It's legally sanctioned slavery. And in quite a few countries, in Bangladesh, for example, I'm under the impression that it's illegal there, but they do it anyway. They keep it hidden.
This is so heinous. I remember the last time I spoke to you about this and, you're at a pace where you can really speak openly about what's going on there. But there's a part of me that's like, oh my gosh. I like to somehow think that I've evolved enough to be able to handle a conversation about any aspect of humanity and actually embrace it for the beauty or for the challenge or for the hurdle or for the obstacle or for the awareness or for the expansive view of this potpourri of what humanity has to offer each other. In this case, it seems like it's a progression. Like on the one hand, 15-year-old, there are some things that 15-year-olds get sucked into that aren't very healthy. And then there's other things that are a little bit less healthy. And then there's other things that are even a little bit less healthy. And then, then there's like the pornography industry, which is some version of what you're speaking of in many cases. And then beyond pornography, there's the industry of human trafficking, which might be the extreme of the extreme. I guess there's nothing beyond it. I mean, torturous human trafficking where you steal a child from their community and their family and then have them be at the mercy of like having sex 10 times in an evening with strangers without having to say anything about anything. Like their voice is long gone. No one really gives a hoot about what these girls have to say. Am I right about that?
You're not just right, but one of the goals of traffickers very typically is to have the girl so demoralized, so degraded, so convinced that she's so worthless that she deserves this. Now, this is a little bit of a sidebar, but it's a story that I'm writing for next week's Psychology Today, and I found it fascinating. Traffickers very, very, very often tattoo or brand their victims. And this is done, kind of to show domination and control. But if you've got something, on your flesh that it's a 24-hour-a-day reminder, it's cruel, it's demoralizing, it's dehumanizing. But the good thing that I'm going to be writing about is there's a woman, she's an Aesthetician, which means that she's qualified to help people with skin problems. And she, in coordination with other professionals, removes tattoos and brands. For a girl who's escaped being trafficked, as long as she has that tattoo on her, it's hard to be really restored to any kind of normal life. And I thought it was just a brilliant idea that this woman thought that her service to humanity includes removing tattoos.
Beautiful. Wow, we could go in so many directions like that. And that really is an outstanding contribution of somebody who's like, okay, what can I do here? I have this skill. How can I match it to the needs of a significant human problem, a human challenge? And so she's found a way to do that. And it is a beautiful contribution.
By the way, I would love to ask you a question, again, with your professional background. Yeah. My intuition is that it's got to be almost incomprehensibly important to get rid of that symbol on you that you were reminder of your past horrible experience. My intuition is that it's hugely important. What do you make of that?
I'm really glad you asked me that. I think you are so intuitive. That's one of the things I love about you. And, there was a space I wanted to speak to that because I think that you could make a case for branded Holocaust victims, and there's not so many of them left anymore, but, the Holocaust, if you will, that Holocaust, sometimes speak to the pride that they have, the associating their history with their numbers. And they would never want to remove it because it reminds them of what eventually gets said, like never again. Or, yep, I lived a life that included the concentration camps. And so even I'm wondering, I've had some friends and even family members who were Holocaust survivors, and I don't know that they would go for having their tattoo removed.
Actually, in preparing for my article for Psychology Today, I read about that very thing. And Holocaust, I've even seen tattoos of numbers. And I have also read, this is part of my life. I own it. You're not going to take it away from me. But I think that's a different case from somebody who was trafficked because there's a shame associated with it. If a Holocaust survivor can be fortified by never again, I don't think there's a huge community of trafficking survivors who are saying never again.
Right. It is a different flair. Okay. Let's pivot here for a second on this. I think what's really interesting here, as you and I take a deeper dive into this, is that if nobody speaks about this, nothing happens. Like silence is the enemy here and is the fuel. So nothing could happen if you knew about this and you just decided, nah, man, this is either too big or too scary or too inevitable or too unchangeable or too vicious for my eyes. And so I'm not going to speak to it. Then nothing happens. So this idea of speaking about it and then making a concerted effort to alter an opportunity to change, like the Optimist group is doing, or like this idea of, if you can do it in Bangladesh, then you can do it anywhere, and then you can do it everywhere. I mean, that's what it sounds like. If you can make $1, you can make 10, you can make 1,000, you can make 1,000,000, you can make 1,000,000,000. It's actually really true. If it can be done once, it can be done many times. But all of this depends on having a conversation. Like actually speaking to what we know or what we see or what works or what doesn't work or what's evil or what isn't evil or what's here for us as humans to take on, and how can we unite? And the only way we can unite is by connecting and conversing with each other, right? So what about what's happening in this world? That is it money that is silencing the entire community? I mean, you could say money's at the root of all evil, but that's not, money is just money after all. What's happening that has us willing to sell our soul before we speak to what we know?
Well, I'm very aware, mainly because I get compliments on it, that a lot of people don't speak out. But I'll tell you why, one of the things that motivates me to write and speak is I've talked with, by now, probably 100 different anti-trafficking organizations. And by the way, the UN recognizes 20,000 of them. So there are a lot who are working on this. But, in the course of writing about them, I asked them, what do you need? And over again, they need two things. They need money and they need awareness. And I have a scheme for raising, I hope, a lot of money for anti-trafficking organizations. And it's something I'm so excited about it. It's eating me alive. I love it. I'm a writer by trade. That's what I've done my entire life. And I've written 23 books. You've heard of Mark Victor Hansen, the Chicken Soup for the Soul guy?
Yeah, good friend. Yeah.
Okay, well, in case somebody isn't familiar with that name, he and his co-author, Jack Canfield, are in the Guinness Book of World Records for selling 500 million books.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's a lot of books.
Well, I asked him one day, because we're friends, I asked him, has anybody ever written your biography? And he said, no. And I said, would you like it? And he said, yes. And I'm right now, probably a third of the way through the book. I've interviewed close to 100 people. And I'm hoping that maybe in 6 weeks, I'll have finished my part of it. Now, part of my motivation for writing about it is because I think Mark has such an exciting message of hope and be all you can be and think big and just lead a vibrant, fully realized life. That's his message. So being part of spreading that message, I'm very excited to do. But the other thing that motivates me is Mark doesn't get involved with books, as far as I can tell, that sell less than 1 million copies. Well, my royalties for this, maybe I'm just pipe dreaming, but it could be $1 million. And if it is, my pledge is to give every penny of it to anti-trafficking organizations. So I could be doing a lot to raise money. And then, this is a pipe dream, so wish me luck on it. But it does have to do with speaking out. If I'm on like the lecture circuit or radio, television, and newspapers talking about Mark Victor Hansen's biography, I'd also get to talk about where the royalties go. And that would just be an enormous platform for getting the message out that there's enormous suffering and the people listening have a chance to do something about it.
Do you have a podcast at this point?
I don't, and I don't think I want one because I'm a writer more than a...
Interesting. The urgency and the plan is absolutely beautiful. And along with this, along with the plan of money, there's a plan of awareness. And along with awareness, there's the need to share, right? There's a need to share through writing, through speaking, through representing, through informing, through interviewing, or through being creative. There's a need to share. Like for our listeners who are like, okay, I've had enough of this particular problem just passing by without me doing anything about it. What can a listener do? I mean, they can send $20 or $100 to someone, but what can they really do so that they can feel like they're in the mix, what can the average listener do so that they can really feel like they're making a difference in this particular area of human evilness?
All right. I would like to direct them to a website. It's called Polaris, like the Polaris star. And just look it up on the internet, Polaris. And maybe connect your search Polaris human trafficking. And when you get to that website, you'll learn, probably 20, 30 different ways of recognizing when human trafficking is going on. And then if you suspect trafficking, and once your eyes are open to it, you're going to see it. When you suspect trafficking, contact Polaris. And then it's very important that I add something else, which is if you suspect trafficking, don't try to intervene yourself because you could put the victim's life in danger. So if it's imminent, like call the police or 911, but if it's sort of generically, let Polaris know and they can do something about it. But if they had more eyes all over, they could do more.
Are people going to learn that it's happening right there in their neighborhood, right there in their city? Is it that ubiquitous that it's really everywhere?
It's absolutely everywhere. Well, 40 million people are enslaved right now, and that's a United Nations figure. And by the way, that United Nations figure is almost a decade old, so I'm anxiously awaiting to hear the new figures. And unfortunately, they're likely to be higher because human trafficking feeds on poverty. And I've heard one estimate, I can't swear that it's true, but I can tell you that the statistic is out there, that because of COVID, almost 1 billion more people are in extreme poverty than were before. Mm-hmm. And maybe extreme poverty is the wrong word, but poverty at a level at which they become vulnerable to being trafficked. 1 billion more people, that's just
overwhelming. That's 1 out of 7 people.
And I want to share something that guides me, and it has to do with Mother Teresa.
Okay.
Mother Teresa said, it's immoral to be discouraged by the magnitude of the problem. The good that we can do, we must do.
I love that.
In fact, there's a little quick story behind it.
Please.
She was a nun, a teaching nun in, I believe, Calcutta, and she would teach the children of the rich. But she was aware of the lepers that were everywhere in Calcutta. And she petitioned her superior, I want to leave this fancy school and I want to go out and work with the poorest of the poor. And he said, you can't do that. I think the story is that there are 10,000 people a day dying of leprosy and you, one nun, can't make any difference. And her answer to him was, it's immoral to be discouraged by the magnitude of the problem. The good that we can do, we must do.
Mm-hmm. It's just astonishing. The thing about Mother Teresa and the thing about what you're saying is we might have a tendency to feel helpless, hopeless, inept, and disempowered about taking on things that otherwise we really could take on. If I look across the street, if I read this Polaris and I look across the street and I go, oh my goodness, it's actually it's happening right there in that home across the street, like right there. It points to a couple things. Number one, I like that guy, actually. I might like him, right? He and I talk. We go to the store together. We sometimes have tea or a beer together. And then I'm learned, there might be, or there could be, or it sure looks like there's involvement with trafficking going on right there. It points to this thing of soullessness that you spoke of earlier. Is it really soullessness? Here's my point. I know where I want to go with this. Tough question here, Mitzi. Is there any part of Mitzi Perdue that can be compassionate with the traffickers?
Yes. And it's the following, that most of the traffickers have had some pretty horrible things happen to them in their lives. They're highly likely to have been viciously abused themselves as children.
Mm-hmm. So that it becomes a status quo, something that's not breaking any rules.
Over and over and all, it's intergenerational. So, yeah.
Exactly, right? So when you speak or when you write your blog, your 600-word injection in Psychology Today, what are you calling for? What's your call to action for us? What is it that you want to happen in this lifetime of ours, this temporary lifetime of ours, that has at least you leaving with a legacy of having really made a difference in this horrible phenomena that humans have now found themselves in?
Okay, here's my dream. I'm not a therapist. I can't go rescue somebody. The tools that I have are writing and speaking. Since I'm not qualified to do any of the real work, what I would absolutely love, my dream, is when somebody reads one of my articles, like, for example, the tattoo lady, the woman who removes tattoos, Or what I'm about to post today is what the Optimist Foundation is doing. I would just love for somebody reading this to think, oh, that's something that I could help with. No, my dearest dream is that somebody reading my articles will contact the organization. And, it's astonishing to me that, and deeply pleasing that does happen.
Well, it goes again to this idea that if you can get one person to do that, then you can get 10 people to do that. Then you can get 100 people to do that. Then you can get 1,000, 10,000, 1,000,000, 1,000,000,000. And really, you can start that ripple and make a difference. And Mother Teresa's quote is fitting here. The magnitude of the problem can't be what slows you down. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, the good that we can do, we must do. The other thing is, I hope that I'm typical of a lot of people where if you see just an incredible injustice and cruelty, that you don't turn your back on it. If there's something that you can do, you do it.
I love that. And I think it points to what we're really talking about here today is when you say do something, you're really saying speak something, say something. I mean, because you're actually overtly saying, don't do anything, don't do anything. Don't go in there stop. You could endanger someone if you go in there and do something. But when you speak to doing something, I think you're speaking to voice, true voice, say something to the right people, join the right clubs or make the right calls or talk to the people that can be effective in making a difference in an area. But it's interesting how we equate doing something with saying something. And that's how important it is to speak our truth.
Well, I would love it if people would get in contact with me in the following way. If they will text WIN, W-I-N, the word WIN, to 55312, that will automatically get them signed up for my blog. And they'll hear from me once or twice a week because I don't just write for Psychology Today. I also write for, several other groups. And odds are that somebody who signs up for this, they're going to hear about an organization that's doing great things, and maybe they'd want to join, or maybe they'd want to make a contribution. My theory, and it's paid out so far, is that everybody has a skill. I mean, maybe it's somebody who's an administrative assistant, just really good at getting mail out, or maybe they're a graphic artist or a web designer, or whatever somebody's skill is, we can find a use for you. Contact me and I will point you there.
That's amazing. So, Mitzi, I love what you're up to. And I even love that today we didn't really spend a time about your storied past, your unique history, who you've been in your whole life. We can ask our listeners to look you up if they're curious about that. But, how someone like you could get set up to actually have this be what this aspect, this portion of your life is dedicated to. It's so inspiring. And I do invite our listeners to take a peek at who you've been in the world and who you now are, and the beauty of you being committed to something so important, so crucial. And no wonder you look so alive, because you're actually doing something that is affecting all of humanity, and you're being that way through your talk, through your speech, and through your presentation. I, for one, and know that I'm representing really the world around you in saying that you're a massive inspiration and that you're making a real difference. And it's just lovely.
I just died and gone to heaven. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. It has been a deep honor. Mitzi, you've talked about how they can get, 55312 will get that, and WIN will get you in their blog, and they can look you up in Psychology Today. Is there another space that people can, if they want to follow you, what would they do?
Yeah, if they'll go to my website, which is MitziPerdue.com.
And that's with a Z, isn't it?
Yeah, M-I-T-Z-I.
Yeah.
And if they'll do that, there's a contact me section, and I'll answer anybody who writes to me.
Yep, you will. It's true. She will. No kidding. And look, wherever you are in this cascade, if it has something to do with human trafficking, or you're just curious about this beautiful woman and what you want to know, this is a pretty good time to reach out to somebody who's going to reach back out to you, a loving person who can be really warm, really inspiring, and, give hope where hopelessness is residing. So, Mitzi, thanks for coming on the True Voice edition of the Welcome to Humanity podcast. It's really beautiful to have you. It's beautiful to see you. It's beautiful to speak with you. It gives me hope in my life, and it's really been an honor to speak with you again today. Thank you.
Well, you sure made me feel good, so thank you so much.
My pleasure, Mitzi. It's always my pleasure. Thanks again. And listeners, thanks for hanging on. Thanks for being here at this time. Thanks for taking your time to listen. There are things to do, but when I say things to do, I'm really saying things to speak, things to listen to. It is time to speak. And if you don't speak, nobody will ever hear you. So it's really important to take this life and do what you can and speak what you will and bring that true voice out. Humanity is challenging, and it's time now to actually make that difference. We don't know what's coming tomorrow, but we do know that we do have now, and now might be a time to actually reach out and make that difference. So thanks for being here with me. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being you. We'll catch you on the flip side. Welcome to Humanity.